Well, everybody, John Bornschein here, and this is Cable Lane. I want to welcome you back to our weekly Bible study. It's entitled Experiencing God Day by Day by Dr. Henry Blackaby. In today's study, he's entitled it Spiritual Markers. Listen to this. And the children of Israel did so, just as Joshua commanded, and took up 12 stones from the midst of the Jordan, as the Lord had spoken to Joshua, according to the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, and carried them over with them to the place where they lodged. Now, the context there, if you go back to Joshua chapter 4, even back up to Joshua chapter 3, you'll find that the Lord did yet another miracle for the children of Israel. And I say yet another because if you go back through their 40 years of wandering through the wilderness, not only did he take them out of Egypt and make them cross through the Red Sea, which parted miraculously, and they walked across on dry land, in and through into the land of, I believe, Saudi Arabia, where the true Mount Sinai is, and there the Lord meets with his people. He gives them his commandments and then carries them through the wilderness, and yet we find that in their disobedience, they're to spend 40 years there. Well, during that time, the Lord provides for them. He gives them water miraculously. He gives them manna and quail. He tends to their every need. He provides cloud by day, fire by night. He was Emmanuel, God with us. He was there with his people, tabernacled with his people. And then when the time came for them to go into the promised land, the Lord was to fulfill every one of his promises. He never breaks a single one. He takes them through to the promised land. Joshua leads the people with Caleb at his side. And they will go through the Jordan River. As they go through the Jordan River, the Lord blocks up the water just like he did when they went through the Red Sea. It's miraculous. It required them with the Ark of the Covenant to go before them, and the waters stop. They cross over miraculously. And when they get to the other side, the Lord then instructs them for each of the men to carry for their tribe a large stone. And they were to erect that stone as a spiritual marker. It was going to be an indicator for the generations to come of what God had done in that place. He was going to receive the glory for it. So often we're surrounded by memorial stones today that really indicate the accomplishments of men. We see a lot of markers, a lot of statues, and they're really framed after men. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, all of these men of our past here in these United States even. And they are testimonies to their accomplishments. But for the people of Israel, it was different. They were to erect standing stones that were to be memorial stones for the people to testify to what God had done in their midst. Another example comes up in 1 Samuel chapter 7, verse 12, in which we see Samuel put forth what he calls an Ebenezer Stone. And what it signified is the Lord has helped us. They were going to see those rocks and declare, this is a standing stone unto the Lord. He has helped us. He has carried forth his promises. He has delivered. And so often in our own flesh, we think about what we've accomplished, what we have done, and failed to recognize God's the one who even put breath in your body. For the people of Israel, even the battles that they would face, it was the Lord who gave them victory. When they would try to take the chariots, the Lord said, no, strike the horses. It was the Lord who was going to bring them victory even on the battlefield. So those stones were markers unto God to remind all the generations to come. It says that they're still there to this day. We may not know exactly where they're at, but they are still there, and they testify to what God did in that place. You know, the Apostle Paul uses a very similar indicator as he gives us his epistles, the Lord's epistles, the instructions to the church. He tells us in 1 Corinthians chapter 9 that we are to run the race as to win the prize. And the prize he's talking about is not something that's perishable, not a crown or even some kind of medal that would be awarded to those Olympians even at that time. It was something that he wanted us to put our eyes on, something that is imperishable, that which is eternal, treasures in heaven. And when he talks about running the race, he also alludes to it in Philippians chapter 3, verse 14, that we run the race, that we press ahead toward the goal of the prize that awaits us in heaven. not that which is on earth. So both of these give us an image of a marathon. It's an endurance race. And if you've ever run a marathon, you know that there are markers, at least here in these United States, we have them every mile. For most marathons, you'll find that they're every kilometer or so, and those indicators that will be made in advance, letting them know there will be a marker at that location, a flag, or even a check mark of some kind to give the runners that encouragement, perhaps, that they are passing yet another marker. For the Christian, we have similar markers in our lives. I think that if you've ever been in a school, you know that there's curriculum that has been put together, and it's called scope and sequence. And with every graduation point, you should know all of those things when you move on to the next grade. So teachers know that as you go through curriculum of kindergarten, a kindergartner, when they graduate to first grade, needs to know certain things, and then they move up to the next grade level. Well, for Christians, we need to do the same thing. We are running a marathon, and we need those markers along the way, spiritual markers, to know that we have graduated to the next stage. That's part of discipleship. And that can involve not only the day that we give our lives to Jesus Christ, but also days that we're baptized. And we need to mark those down. We need to write those dates, celebrate what God has done, not what you've accomplished, but what God has done through you. And when He gives you great victories, it's important, I believe, to go and write those things down. Celebrate what God has done in your maturation, as well as those maturation points within your family and sphere of influence as they grow up in Jesus Christ. We should celebrate these things. It's a rite of passage, after all, that often gets lost in the busyness of life. But God knows. He's seeing the good work of the sanctification work He's doing in you, and we ought to be overjoyed when God keeps growing us up in Him. Listen to these words from Dr. Henry Blackaby. He says, "A spiritual marker identifies a time of decision when you clearly know that God guided you. Can you remember the moment you became a child of God? Were there specific times when He called you to His ways of living? Can you point to times when He clearly guided you in a decision? Were there times when He spoke powerfully to you about a commitment you should make? Keep track of these important moments. Regularly rehearse them and notice the steady progression in the way God has led you. This will help you understand God's activity in your life and give you a sense of direction as you face future decisions." I hope you've been encouraged today. God bless you, my friends. Take care.